Shirupa, can you hear me? I hope we are not muted.
Yes, ma'am. I'm hearing
Yes,
you.
yes,
Yes, ma'am.
Shirupa. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You are audible
Right.
completely and see you well.
So please
Yes,
tell
ma'am.
us something about
So,
yourself. Where are you affiliated with right now? And what are you doing currently?
uh, yes, ma'am. First of all, ma'am, good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Shri Rupa Shaha. I am independent researcher. Now I am independent researcher. Actually, I am completed my master's from Calcutta University in South and Southeast Asian Studies. And after that, I completed second master's completed from Kalyan University in history. And now I am pursuing my research on the topic of partition and especially my focus on women's. But definitely, I'm very much interested on caste and media also. So that's why I'm always follow you, your lectures, your articles. That is very much is mean to me. It's very much meaningful for me, my research.
Okay, so far you find the lectures helpful and you understand them well?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, absolutely. First of all, this is very important. Actually, if any students have want to understand the partition history thoroughly, this lecture is a very meaningful and very helpful for them. Through this research, you elaborately, thoroughly, uh, specifically, you describe the every step of partition, the pre-partition stage, the partition stage, and post-partition stage. I think these three stages are very distinctively you discuss in this uh, uh, research, in this what I say course. So definitely, it's very helpful for researcher like us and student. Definitely, I think. And I have a lot of question, ma'am, through these uh, courses. The first, I want to know one question. I may I ask you, ma'am, my
Yes,
question?
please go ahead. Please.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I want to know. I am first of all a history student, so I have a very query that if I want to portray the oral history, uh, then if I'm it's a way oral history is important to uh, oral history is important to uh, portray the what I'm saying, the master narratives. So I want to know the significance of oral history. That the oral history is importance, and could you explain that oral history is important to actual imply the master narrative of the history?
Okay, so I have your question in hand, Srirupa. If I understand it well, you have put it here as follows. Do you believe that oral history plays a crucial role in revealing the master narrative? And the second part of the question is if we examine the oral history of partition trauma and personal testimonies, what
Yes.
methodology would be most effective in explaining them? Right? So
Yes,
here
yes, yes, right.
so that's a very important question. Let me begin by saying that partition as a topic is far from frozen and over. It is an ongoing process, not partition, but the path that partition has shown to the entire geopolitical land that we call South Asia today. Different parts
Yes,
want partition now. At the drop of the hat, we are talking about partition and separating and making different countries, right? So the partition
yes,
uh, and the formation of Pakistan showed a way. You could say it was the beginning or culmination of a crisis, or it was solution from for the Muslim community. Whichever way you see it from. The now we don't have a history of partition. You have to understand we have histories of
yes,
partition.
okay,
The undivided Indian subcontinent prior to partition had this multitudinous, uh, we have people living here coexisting across communities, linguistic groups, different ethnic groups. not to say communities and religious groups or different faith coming together. So at the nexus of these different categories of one's identity, we understand the relationship of Indians with each other, even the regional feuds and disputes, right, which is still ongoing, which is still
True.
visible. So on the one hand, I'm just trying to give you a more elaborate answer, and I'll make a detour, but I'll eventually come to your point. Why oral history? So basically, it's a land with so many layers in terms of its history, in terms of its culture, in terms of its regional polities and dynamics. Even before it went on to become a nation, which is a very young category. You have to understand, nation, India as a nation is something very young. It just happened in the colonial times.
Absolutely.
Prior to that, we had the princely states and basically different princely states, right? Hyderabad is a chapter in itself. We have in the northeast, we have what is this place? Tripura in itself. Kashmir is still a burning issue. So these facts are far from to have a coherent picture through a grand narrative might be very simplistic, is all I'm trying to say. When we look at the partition narrative from the Indian side, that is a truth. From Pakistan side, they posit another perspective and another point of view, which is that of the Muslim Indians, a major part of whom went on to form a different state, the two nation theory, right? They thought it is a way of survival for the minorities. But then there were so many crises that Pakistan faced subsequently, and then a lot of people believe now that Pakistan is a failed state because it established its identity on the grounds of religion, Islamic State. So, whatever it is, we are not going into that, but it is very difficult to sustain such a complex and ongoing topic such as partition, whose phantasm keeps coming back to haunt us till date in terms of a meta narrative, in terms of a grand narrative. One grand narrative, one formal history without any jagged edges, without any open endedness. If you look at what Gyanendra Pandey is saying, right? Memories with jagged edges, memories that are difficult to bear, difficult to remember, and manage, and kind of once you remember those memories, it's very difficult to manage because they are full of excesses, they are full of emotional excesses, they are full of uh, dilemmas that have remained unanswered, so full of open-endedness, right? So once we try to
Right.
give a closure to that through a grand narrative, it becomes very simplistic. Which community is at fault? And then it's not only the question of community. Many people, there are several partition scholars like Shikhar Bandyopadhyay from Bengal, before that Aisha Jalal from Pakistan, many of them who, we have Mushirul Hassan, to name a few, uh, they are not only looking at the Hindu-Muslim dyadic, situation. When we bring another category to this entire discourse, which is the category of caste, you said you are interested in caste, it becomes all the more difficult. If you look at the Bengal chapter of partition, it's not only Hindu Muslim discourse, because a lot of the Muslims we find are converted just a few generations back. So the Muslimness is interspersed with the question of caste belonging. So when the caste comes in, and the linguistic group is thrown in, and the regional dynamics is thrown in, it becomes way too complex in order for one uniform meta narrative or grand narrative to sustain this whole past. The jagged edges start showing. It is more complex than it seems in a grand narrative. And as a way of uh, giving a fair amount of representation to this complexity that partition is, hmm, we need to give some platform to the oral narratives, where grand narrative What is grand narrative? Grand narrative is his story, history, his story. So where is her story? Where is their story? It is the story of us. Who has been writing the history, the canonical version of partition narrative? The educated, Western educated, essentially upper caste, upper class, uh, in the
Bhadralok.
Bhadralok. In the case of Bengalis, we have the term Bhadralok. At the pan-Indian level, it is the gentry class, people who have positions. People who have positions, they have access to uh, socio-economic, cultural resources, capital. So their history will be a certain representation, which is not wrong, but which is certainly, selective in nature. So oral history basically dismantles all that. Once you start talking about which, at the turn of the century, we see in the 1990s, Urvashi Butalia is attempting for the first time the feminist interventions of the partition, entire partition, the watershed that partition was. And we see that the cat is out of the bag. We are talking about things that we have never talked about: rape survivors, riot victims, women who had to adjust in very peculiar ways. They had families on both sides, children on both sides. So when we talk about grand narrative is the narrative of the powerful. It could be the government official, it could be the government version at that time. What is the plebeian version? What is the version of the public? Oral narrative becomes very important. For example, just before, during, and after the partition, a lot of people are writing to the government officials, the then British officials, especially people from the borderland areas. They don't even know till the last moment whether they will be part of India or Pakistan on the west, and on the eastern side whether they will be part of West Bengal or this East Pakistan. Till a long time, that is not made clear from where the Radcliffe line will pass. It was an arbitrary line, right? People didn't know whether it will pass through a river, through their village, through their home. People are writing letters. What became of these letters? No one knows. People's quandary, people's dilemma, people's questions from below, the grassroots dilemma that displaced at the tail end of partition. All these things get lost. As if recovering this history, okay, oral oral narrative and what you call as the oral history is very important. Currently, we have a young scholar doing very good work from on the Bengal side of partition, Professor Shumanu Mukhopadhyay. So Professor Shumanu Mukhopadhyay has some great contributions. He's a proclaimed oral historian, and he's doing some good work on oral history. Prior to that, we have someone like Anushwa Boshu Raichaudhuri from
Oh,
Bengal once again.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, Anushwadi is doing very good work. There are a number of people who have done amazing work, and I think the floodgate opens for the first time in 1980s when someone like Partha Chatterjee starts the subaltern studies. When we talk about subaltern rebellions and subaltern protests and the version of history, the histories from coming from the grassroots level, the entire notion of history is destabilized. Okay. So you also ask, I hope this is making sense how master narratives are simplified. They don't deal too much with the crisis itself. The master narrative rather has a tendency to transcend the crisis, silence the crisis, and think about it has a future facing or future bound attitude. So, whatever crisis has happened, whatever bloodshed and massacre has happened, we leave that behind and we think of nation building. How India and Pakistan can build themselves as successful nations, and how the refugee population can be absorbed into the citizenry, how we can become successful citizens, transit from refugeehood to citizenship. So all these building aspects, which is important, which is pragmatic, but that is not all about the past. Sometimes we don't feel like, talking about the uncomfortable past. Oral history does that. The version of the Dalit, the version of the woman, the version of the juvenile. Now we have something, a Dalit social activist, intellectual, who has been writing for more than a decade now, almost 2 decades. We have Monoranjan Bepari. So he's talking about his juvenile experience. So he's a refugee at the same time. He's a Dalit community person, and at the time when he was writing, the memories from where he brings the partition narrative, that's from his childhood days, right? So he is a juvenile, a Dalit from the Chandal caste, and he is a refugee, marginalized three times over, thrice over. So all these versions, where do they go? Where do they vent out their experiences? Through oral narratives, through oral history. Oral history gives a more democratic representation, a more symmetrical representation to the ordinary people. It's a plebeian voice, basically. And what methodology would you use? Your second part of question, what
Yes, yes,
methodology would be most effective in explaining them? I mean, the best way to work on oral memories, one part would be definitely the academic pedantic way of doing it, which is going through some of those archives. You have a lot of these archives in National Library, for example, many of these libraries. But that is only the beginning point. Oral narrative is best covered by talking to people. So
through
structured,
interviews.
unstructured, open-ended interviews. Sometimes the questions are impromptu. But then you also have to think about the epistemic violence. There is something called epistemic violence. And you may not want to do that. If there is a survivor and if there is a threshold beyond which he or she doesn't want to respond, this survivor could be a female. Because she's a female, she faced gendered violence. Because he or she is a Dalit, they faced a caste based violence. So you may not ask questions beyond their comfort level. So whenever you are talking about oral history, interviews, spending time with the marginalized human subject, you have to know the limits of your academic research. The moment they don't want to speak, you cannot force them. In the interest of your research, you cannot give up on human ethics. Fine. So these are some of the things you have to remember. I think I have given a very extended answer, but let me know if
Yes.
that makes sense.
No, it's very meaningful for me because I am an independent research and I'm definitely writing my research proposals also, and I work for these issues. So these things is very helpful, meaningful for me to make my understanding. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And also look at something that is coming up in scholarship, partition scholarship these days, which we call as the intersectional studies. So one of
Yes,
TAs for this course, my
interdisciplinary.
scholar Devdatta Chakraborty, she has also made some contributions. Her works are also available online.
Oh,
You along with me, so both of us have done some joint works, Devdatta Chakraborty and myself,
okay,
Dr. Sharvani.
okay, okay,
So you may want to see
okay,
how interestingly she is, and she is working once again on the Bengal side of partition and the intersection of
okay.
caste and gender. She is looking at the likes of Kalyani Thakur Charal, right? Monoranjan Bepari
Yeah,
and
yeah, okay,
Monju Bala, Monohar Mouli Vishas. So these are all Dalit
okay,
refugees. At once they are refugees and also they suffer because of their Dalitness. So she is studying this intersectionality. Fine. That means a
okay,
very
okay,
interesting
okay.
crossing point also. Like India cannot be a homogeneous experience of partition, right? It
Absolutely, ma'am.
varies across region, linguistic background, and caste background, class background, and
That's
everything.
right.
So please
And
dig
I,
out the
and I think
complexities. Mhm.
And I think, ma'am, Punjab partition and Bengal partition, those two scenario is totally different because Punjab partition, I think it started 1947 and ended in 1950s like that. But I think Bengal partitions starting we know 1947, but ending is Lord. I don't know what is the ending of
Because
the Bengal partition.
of Nehru Liaquat Ali Pact, that created a dilemma once again. The border remained porous, and the border is porous till date. And
A lot of
by this,
political issues is there.
political issues are there, sharing of natural resources, sharing of water bodies are
Yes.
there. So that is to some extent also there between on the western side of border, the Indo-Pak border. So they also share rivers and water resources. But as far as the human migration is concerned, although there are time to time cases of violating the line of control, there are cases we know, but by and large, officially speaking, the border is sealed. The border, Indo-Pak border is sealed, and it was sealed right then. There was major violence, major bloodshed, but officially it was declared that by 1948 the border Indo-Pak border is sealed on the western side, which never happened on the eastern side, thanks to Nehru Liaquat Ali Pact. So it remained porous, and why we cannot, it's very peculiar to observe that although we call ourselves in the post-partition period, we call ourselves as separate nations. That concept of autonomous nation or separate nation does not work in the South Asian part of the globe. If there is a riot in India, it has a repercussion in Bangladesh. If there is something happening on the Hindus in Bangladesh, we find a repercussion somewhere in India. It's all in continuum. Even what is happening with the Rohingyas, we have a repercussion among the Muslims in India. It's all in continuum and it is in a dialogue, ongoing dialogue. So you have to, the beginning point of this study, a lot of people posit and in fact argue that partition is a frozen topic. Far from that. Far from that. The ghost comes back to haunt every time there is a communal issue, every time there is a question of political representation of the minorities, be it in India, be it in Bangladesh, and the repercussion in the abetting nation shows among the neighbors. So definitely we are in a continuum, and the kind of migration at unofficial level, the way it happens between India and Bangladesh at least, it's alarming and it's remarkable actually. So we can hardly
A
say
lot
that
of
we
push
are
and
totally
pull
separate.
factors. Yes.
Hmm?
Yes.
Lot of push and pull factors are there, and a lot of things are happening um, at the unofficial level, right? So migration at the unofficial level keeps happening, right? So these the whole category of nation, which is a Western concept, does it fit well in the South Asian part of the globe? That is also something we need to deliberate on. Does nation as a category, a Western category, just like a lot of critics would say, does secularism as a category sit here well? Or do we have something similar to secularism, but not quite that? Because these are all coming, secularism came from Protestant revolution, right? From
Right.
Britain, Great Britain. Similarly, nation as a category, it's a very Western concept. Each nation has its own history and trajectory. Can we very easily, interchange and exchange these terms very easily and safely? So, is once again, is nation as a category, um, does it fit the bill of South Asian reality? Is something we need to deliberate. Maybe something similar to nation, but not quite the nation. Because even after dividing, they function in a way, in some way, in a very unified fashion. The whole region and its dynamics. Right? Do we?
Ma'am, I just asked,
Yes. Please.
ma'am, can I ask you a question? Ma'am, there have any possibility to sending any my own work, any article to you, any email ID? Can there any
Maybe
possibility?
my
If
email ID
yes,
is there on the forum. Is there an email ID on the forum?
okay,
My
okay. I use
idea.
this email ID. Okay.
I have my IIT Roorkee email ID on the forum. Yes, just refer to my IIT Roorkee email ID forum, and you could just ask me some quick questions or suggestions, and I'm there to help you. I'll
Okay.
reply you
Okay.
as soon as possible. Fine.
Okay. Okay. Okay, ma'am. Okay. Thank you.
All right, Sirupa, all the best.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
So next we have Gaurav Poswal. Hi Gaurav, would you like to unmute yourself and you have a question today? Hi Gaurav, can you hear us? Gaurav Poswal? Gaurav, you are online but you are muted. If you have a question, you could unmute yourself. Or if you have any internet connectivity issue, you could also type on the chat box. Where is the chat box? It's just and okay, here's written. So no questions. All right. So you could still share with us regarding your affiliation and what you're doing currently, Gaurav. You could write in the chat box. That's all right. And what got you interested in the course? Firstly, thanks to all of you that joined and showed your interest in my course. So I'm really glad. You could just tell us about your affiliation and what you're doing currently. Let's wait for more people to join. वीडियो ऑफ कर सकते हैं
क्वेश्चन आ रहा है तो ठीक है तो आप बंद कर सकते हैं क्वेश्चंस आ रहे हैं तो ठीक है ना अदरवाइज
थोड़ा वेट कर जाए कितना हाफ एन आवर हो गया 10 minutes more starts makes sense So if we don't have any further questions and we don't have any more learners joining, shall we wrap up the session for today? Learners, thank you for joining. And if you have any further queries, um, please feel free to drop your question on the discussion forum, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.